All right, Chapter 16, Section 4, Rise of Austria and Prussia. How did the two great empires of Austria and Prussia emerge from the 30 Years' War and subsequent events? So by the end of the chapter, you should be able to outline the causes, results of the 30 Years' War, explain how Austria and Prussia emerged as great powers, and then be able to discuss how European nations attempted to maintain a balance of power. So if we look at the 30 Years' War and the ravages of Europe, this is the last of the religious wars, or essentially the last of the religious wars in Europe. And one of the things that you see during the 30 Years' War is it moves from being about religion to the end of the 30 years, it's about geopolitics and the balance of power. So even within the war itself, what begins as a war over religion ends up being a political war like most of the others we've had since. So what tips this off is in the region of Bohemia, you've got a number of Protestants who are asserting their control, and you've got a couple of Protestant noblemen that throw several Roman Catholic out the window of a building, and that really ticks off the emperor, who's going to become the Holy Roman Emperor. And so that's what kicks this whole thing off. He's going to try and push these Protestants out. And then on top of that, he's going to try and roll back some of the gains made during the Protestant Reformation and get Europe to be more Roman Catholic. And so that's why it's a war of religion. It ends up involving way more than just Bohemia and Austria, Hungary. I mean, it's going to end up bringing all of the powers of Europe into the mix at some point in time. So regardless of all of this type of stuff, when you look at all of the different involvements and switching to and from supporting for or against the emperor, there's all kinds of craziness that goes on with this. And you can even see that people change based on how things are going during the war. But regardless of all that, Germany by far gets hit really hard. So if you look at the population loss in Germany during the 30 Years' War, there's some regions of Germany where 50%, over 50% of the population is gone at the end of it. The dark purple areas, you're talking 41 to 50%. And so there's these big portions of Germany where they just get depopulated. 1/3 of the German population is killed during this because all of this fighting takes place on German lands. Mercenaries attack civilians as well as warring. So it really ends up being a pretty horrific thing for Germany. So eventually you're going to get the Peace of Westphalia in 1648. It's going to redefine the boundaries of European countries. It's also going to set up some brand new independent countries. So, for example, you've got the United Netherlands. Switzerland gets recognized as an independent, neutral country. And so all of these things are going to reshape kind of Europe a little bit, and that's what the Peace of Westphalia does. And so if we look at, evaluating who wins, who loses, France comes out of there a little bit better off than most other countries. They gain territory from both Spain and from France. The Netherlands and the Swiss definitely come out as winners because they're now recognized as independent countries. The Holy Roman Empire and Germany come out as the biggest losers because this is going to kind of pretty much mark the end of the Holy Roman Empire. Not that it really existed anyway, but this is really the beginning of the end for those emperors. The countries that also kind of pick up from the ashes is Austria emerges as kind of a more powerful independent, and Prussia. So if we look at Austria faces a lot of issues. The geography of it and the diversity of it. There's just not much that unifies Austria. There aren't clear geographic boundaries or borders, and it's made up of lots of different regions and ethnic groups. So you can kind of see that on this map. And the other thing that it really lacks is a strong centralized government. And even when we get Maria Theresa, even though she attempts to have a strong centralized government, it really doesn't exist there like it does other places. And so it's going to have a tough time creating an absolute monarchy like some of the other places that we talked about. So, mentioning Maria Theresa, the emperor is going to die without a male heir, but he does have a daughter. And so, what he does is he arranges with neighboring countries to leave his daughter alone because he's kind of fearful that they'll want to pick on the woman on the block. And what ends up happening is they make these promises, and then after he dies, they break them. And so, you see Prussia taking advantage of this, and they're going to capture the region of Silesia, which is a mineral rich region of Austria. And at that point in time, Maria Theresa goes to the Hungarians, which is the biggest ethnic group in the Austrian Empire. And even though they are typically anti royal supporters, again, as the book says, she makes this moving speech and she convinces them to fight for Austria. And on top of that, she's going to get a little help from Great Britain and Russia, who want to maintain the balance of power. So even though she doesn't get Silesia back from Prussia, what she is able to do is preserve her empire. And she's able to avoid being totally taken over by Prussia. So if we look at Prussia, creating a bureaucracy, Prussia follows a little bit of a different route. And so the leaders of Prussia, what they decide to do is they are going to tap into the nobility. So what they're going to do is they're going to bring the nobility in on their side. And so the Junkers, which are the nobility, the landowning class, the wealthiest people in Prussia, what the Hohenzollerns decide to do is they're going to appoint them to key government and army offices. And by that, doing that, what they're doing is they're bringing in the people who are most likely to challenge them and making them part of the government. And that's how they're going to centralize their powers, by bringing them in. And they're also going to glorify war and army. And so if you look at that quote, Prussia is not a state which possesses an army, but an army which possesses a state. And so most of Prussia's resources are going to go to building up their army. And, you know, what that also means is if you're going to have an army, you need to kind of use it. So Prussia is going to be a player and also kind of a troublemaker as we go along here. So if you look at the Crown Prince learns the art of war, the prince would rather do other things, but his dad forces him to get trained in war. The prince enjoyed poetry and that type of stuff. At one point, he tries to escape because he doesn't want to go into this life. His father captures him, brings him back, and actually executes his buddy in front of him to prove a point. And then what you get is you get Ferdinand II, who then embraces war. And as soon as he becomes the leader of Prussia, he attacks Austria and steals Silesia from them. So he's going to be pretty active here. And the other thing you can see in this is this was Poland, and you're going to get Russia, Prussia, and Austria, who are all going to agree to the partition of Poland, and they're going to divide Poland up into 3 different parts. And so this kind of gives you an idea of Frederick II's attitude about his people. And this shows the acquisitions of Prussia, and there's Silesia that gets taken from Austria-Hungary. And so you can see how they're expanding outward as things go along. So the rivalry of great power. So when you get to the 1700s, you've really got France, England, Spain, Russia are kind of the big players in all of this, and Austria, Hungary, and Prussia are emerging as great powers. And what you're looking at is really things fall into 2 different camps. You've got Prussia and Austria, who are kind of lining up against each other, and you've got France and Great Britain, which are going to line up against each other. And so most of what's going to happen here when you look at these worldwide conflicts is people getting involved based on making sure that the balance of power doesn't tip too much one way or the other. So, for example, if France is getting more powerful, Austria, Prussia, Russia, they might jump in to tip the balance to help England out and vice versa. And so that's really what's going to happen with these worldwide conflicts.